The Council of Social Work Education released a statement of credibility and reconciliation in 2021. 2021. This statement openly admitted that the social work profession has harmed Indigenous and tribal people in the past and continues to cause harm today. The purpose of this statement is not just to apologize, it is to, mean to push social workers to tell the truth about their history and take responsibility for repairing harm. The CSEW argues that real reconciliation requires action and not just good intentions. Why does this statement matter? The social work is a profession that claims to promote social justice and well-being. However, the CSWE acknowledge that social workers have often helped carry out government policies that harm Indigenous communities. This statement challenged the ideal that social work has always been a helping profession. It asks social workers to reflect on how they have supported the system of colonization and also oppression. From the theoretical perspective, it helps us understand why social work has harmed not just what happened, but also criticizing and also the how can I say it? Give me 1 second. Decolonizing theories asks us to look at power, history, and also those knowledgeable in value, basically. I looked up this guy. His name is Paulo Freire. I don't know if you are familiar with him. He was a Brazilian educator and also a social justice theorist. He believed that professionals always work within systems of power, even when they have good intentions, like I said in the beginning. If they do not question these systems, they often end up supporting oppression. So that's important also. And I, read up on that and I'm like, oh, that's good. Let me just put it in my readings. Who he was an educator again. He also brought about the settlers. How can I say it? The settler colonial theory. I'm sorry about that. The settler colonial theory shows how social workers became part of a larger colonial system that tried to control indigenous people by removing the children, reshaping families, and also replacing indigenous knowledge with Western values. The CSWE statement draws on the ideas to argue that reconciliation requires social workers to actively challenge these systems today. So what happened in the past, just trying to clear it up now and just trying to make it better for this population, because again, it's still hard for them to this day. Historical harms. Historically, social workers played a role in policies that force, like I said again, children into boarding schools, remove them from their families. Social workers always also helped push Indigenous people to kind of hold back their language and culture and their traditions to order to fit into the mainstream of American society. And I do see that now, with ICE and stuff like that, just because they're not from here, you got to treat them like they're animals, and they're not, So I see that connection there. Going in present day harms. The CSWE explained that harm did not stop in the past. Indigenous communities are still affected by social work systems today. For example, Indigenous families are overrepresented in the child welfare system. Today I was talking to my supervisor, and she was just telling me how a lot of this was going on back when she was, beginning her social work career, and she see that it really takes a toll on a child when they come into this new home and their new parents don't know where they came from. and they can't really, practice, what they did when they parents when they was with them. So I saw that resemblance there too.
Okay.
Um, Ethical and cultural issues. It's a major ethical problem. Um, is that social work often values, professional expert. We are the expert, but our clients are the experts too. So especially when dealing with this, population and oppressed populations, we have to treat them. I don't want to say like babies, they're not babies, but they're controlling all this, They're going to tell us what they need, what they don't need, but it's up to us to help them with that and navigate through those challenges. So I see that within, the past treatment with indigenous populations, when it comes to that. Indigenous ways are, healing, caring, and also and this can be also ignored in the home again. This can take power away from them and also away from their communities because their community tells who they are. So once they're taking it from that community, they feel like, oh, I don't have what's the reason, to live now? So it's us as social workers to help get that back within them. Hey, I realized X, Y, and Z was taken from you, but I can help you with this. And so you can still practice your norms.
And get back on track. Yeah.
Yes, definitely, yes. I wanted another article I was reviewing. It was the Indigenous Holistic Theory, basically a knowledge of set for practice by Katie Upsall. So I will send you that link too for the article so you can read up on that. The article explains that wellness is not just about the individual. It includes the mind, body, and spirit, emotions, family, community, land, and culture. This theory is rooted in the additional knowledge system that has existed long before the Western social work. So this is a really key and play into this community also. So that's why I had to tie it into this presentation. It teaches that healing happens through balance, relationships, and connections rather than through isolation. And basically, with professional interventions, because the interventions that we create and we study may not be best fit for this population, and we don't know that just because we learned this. We learned this, like for example, this strengths-based theory. Not all communities can side with that, so it can cause a trigger with them. So I saw this within that too. Mm, the author also helps me understand um, us as social workers, why the Western social workers model often do not fit indigenous communities. Many social work practices focus on the individuals and problems, while this theory focuses on the relationships, collective well-being. So that's important too. You know, this connects directly to the statement within the CSWE, which criticizes social work for replacing indigenous healing practices with professional services. The author also shows that the knowledge is not missing or out of date. It is have simply been ignored and pushed to the side. So all this within the article that I'm going to share with you, it shares this. This theory is a great theory, and in the future, I may use this from my clients. They'll say, "Hey, this really help you make the client comfortable." So like, "Hey, my social worker really care about my background and where I come from." So I get that.
Cultural
I
humility.
Yes. And like I see that a lot. And I also see that a lot of people lack that nowadays. It just here, for a job. What I learned in school, and not with, what else can I learn without, being in school? You know what I'm saying? If that makes sense. Um, I also touched on evidence-based practice concerns. The evidence-based practice is often treated as the best approach in social work. However, the CSWE warns that this can be harmful when, it also dismisses the knowledge of this community of indigenous people. So sometimes the evidence-based practice is not too, you know, much to work with them. So you may want to avoid that when working with them. Many indigenous practices are based on generations of experience and observance, you know. what has my grandmother or great grandmother, has done, on what things that they, did back in the day that I still hold on to this day. That's really important to them. These practices should be, respected as, being valid and effective forms of, knowledge. Just because, like I again stated, we went to school, that's okay. But we're going to learn from our clients too, you know?
Yes.
I want to touch on policies and education implementations. So the CSWE causes on social work education programs to change how they teach students, including adding Indigenous voices to curriculums to get them really familiar with this within, the higher education within colleges, to teach them that, hey, even though you might be, want to be going to be a teacher, you want to do nursing, you want to do this and that, this you have to focus and see how you can make your clients comfortable again. Teaching the truth of the story of behind, social work, what has social work done for these communities, the negative, the positive, so they can learn about that,
Mm-hmm.
And also supporting Indigenous sovereignty. That's really important too. Like I said, the background for them is really important to them, so it should be important to us. Colleges, high schools, middle schools, because you're not going to say who agrees. There should be, more committed to real change, with this community. And it start with, like I said, educating anybody. Us as social workers need to be more educated in this community. Take time to even meet with your client for an hour or two to learn where they come from. Even if they don't know where they come from, search with it, with their client. Oh, let's look it up together. Let's look up your family history and engage in those type of tips. Practice implications for social workers. The using of the Indigenous theory from the article, that's one great one, like I said, respecting Indigenous knowledge as an equal to Western knowledge, because again, it's the same. They both are history. They both are important. So I'm not saying treating it as the same, but treating it as you can talk about it at the same level so it can really stick to people. Because when you tend to talk about one category all the time, the next one is not really, oh, you were just talking about this one, so should this one matter? So just when you talk about both, have the same empathy, sympathy for that, because it shows for both communities you care.
Yes.
Support from the community lens, like the healing practices. Practice that even if you don't have a client in this population. Also focus on relationships, not just service. Like I said, with this population, it's important to focus on relationships, nothing else. Service is going to come. It is going to come, but with this population, they need to know that you care. It's not about, oh, I just looked X, Y, and Z up and I know about you. No, just sit there and have a time and talk with me again. What else? Understanding healing as a collective, not as an individual. Again, we do yoga as an individual, right? Yeah. But what if we did it all as a, collective, and we doing things as, Indigenous people, practice their healing techniques as groups, not just learning as an individual. Because it's going to stick to you when everybody is doing like, oh, hey, I got my friend doing it, so maybe I should do it, influencing each other, basically.
Yes.
This approach supports reconciliation by returning power to these communities, because this is important. Again, to this day, it's 2026. They still don't have power. They need that power to feel like, hey, the land that we have, the land that we served on, we had the power then. Why we don't have it now is because people that not really educated is taken away from them, taking away their spotlight, because everybody has their own spotlight.
Yes.
To close it all up, the CSEW statement makes it clear that social work has caused harm to Indigenous and tribal people. Reconciliation is an ongoing process that requires honesty, accountability, and action. Again, action. Social workers must be committed to changing how they practice, because that's important too. We're going to highlight it again. What you learn in school is okay, but you have to take, even if you're uncomfortable, you're going to be uncomfortable in some time in your life, you know? But when it comes to, being working in the field, it should be no differently from you, you know? Like, this here you working, you getting paid, you here to serve amongst this population. So you should be uncomfortable, but to a certain extent, you know? You know?
Yes.
Um, Also, teach. We have to teach people. Once we are knowledgeable about a certain population or a certain experience, share that with others, because again, that's highlighting people experiences. Because again, just because you experience it and you share with somebody else, they might get a client. Oh, my friend, or my coworker XYZ just said something about this. I can, that can really help me. Now you can touch base with your client. Now you could touch base with your friend, your family, or whoever shared it with you. Like, hey, I just went through the same thing you went through. It's something different, but I see how you had to move with this population, and you really have to be there. It's like holding each other's hands, like I said, not babying, but it's just being that arch for them.
Absolutely.
Yes. Advocating, again, highlighted. That's our job. Advocating for these populations, vulnerable populations, and also truly supporting justice and healing. That's really important. And because right now, healing 2026, we need it. We're just enduring so many things that is uncontrollable, from our lenses as social workers. But it's just, just have our clients back, and just be in there.
I
Yeah.
agree.
And yeah, and that was my little shebang for that. And then I could get into the discussion questions.
All right. Do you want some feedback before the questions?
Yes.
Okay, cool. All right. So first of all, awesome job. Excellent, excellent background.
I'm still stuffy. I just took some nose spray, so thank you.
You're welcome. You did an awesome job. A couple things I noted on was some of the things you said that we as social workers need to focus on to serve this population is,
Hmm.
taking the time to understand, to recognize, and to grow our own knowledge and own understanding of this Indigenous
Yes.
population. Accountability for our own part to play in the um, the oppression of this population, as well as honesty, action, and compassion. Those were like the key points that you brought out that social workers
Yes.
need to have.
Hmm.
And you mentioned this a few times, the idea of like holding their hand, but not in like a
Yes.
childish way. But
Hmm.
I get the image of meeting them where they're at and coming
Yes.
alongside them to hold their hand and walk
Hmm.
with them through the process. Yes.
Yes. Yes. Yes. Because that's really important, because I feel like working, at my internship right now, I see a lot of that. Oh, I'm grown. I'm an adult, but I don't know why I'm here. And I get that. I totally get that. You have free range to see how you feel. What things you want done to yourself, what things you don't want. So I really truly get that. I do. I do.
Yes.
Thank you for that. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Um,
Um,
there was just one more point I wanted to point out
yes, go
as
ahead.
well. You
Mm-hmm.
mentioned, their background to them is important to them, and therefore it should be important to us.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's it's like saying this is a part of your identity, and therefore it's important to me to recognize you as you identify,
Yes.
rather than just
Mm-hmm.
saying that you fit in this bubble or this box that doesn't necessarily fit. So yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
Yes, because again, like back to my reading, so I want to scroll back to just like just 2 or 3 more minutes on the article, because the holistic theory of the indigenous people, and the article just really touched on the mind, body, and spirit, and that's really important. Like I said, context back to the yoga. We think of these 3 components for yoga, but what about our clients? You know what I'm saying? This relaxation within our clients is given healing, because it's healing both me and your client. You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? So like I get that. So okay, I have to put that in my reading, because that's it's not it's making it straightforward. It's just straightforward. It's not making it hard for us to understand. It's just steps to it. It's like soon as we're uncomfortable, everything else falls behind. I don't know how to think. I don't know, because it's really challenging for me. Even beliefs and values, I should have touched on that too. As social workers, our beliefs and values are challenging too when it comes to these things because how we grew up, how we develop, and maybe it's different from all of our clients.
Yeah,
Even if we are the same skin complexion, it's different. So
absolutely.
like I see that from that lens too, and I just appreciate her for highlighting that within that too. Because somebody can read it and it can be easy. Okay, connection. These words are easy to understand. I know with these three words defined.
Yes.
So yeah. Okay.
Excellent.
Anything else you wanted to say?
No, no,
I'm
that was
sorry.
excellent.
Okay. Okay. Okay, thank you. So the first discussion question I had was how does learning about social work roles and colonization change how you view the profession?
Well, I definitely feel like, as we said earlier, just taking that accountability and taking
Mm-hmm.
that time to truly understand where our clients from the Indigenous population are coming
Mm-hmm.
from will help us
Mm-hmm.
to better serve them.
Yes.
So
Mm-hmm.
understanding the colonization is going to help me to become a better service member and be able to
Mm-hmm.
practice the core competencies that we're set out to, especially core competency. I think it's number two about
Mm-hmm.
diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yes.
Um,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
and anti-racism as well, so just being
Mm-hmm.
able to understand that better is going to make me and make us more proficient counselors and social workers in general. So yeah.
Yes. Definitely. I like definitely. And I like how you said it because it's all the ways to make us better. What things can help us improve because we're never perfect. Even if we complete all these things, we still have a lot of learning to do, a lot of achievements to complete. So I really get that. My second question is what responsibilities do social workers today have for harms caused in the past? I
Well,
just, yeah. Mm-hmm.
again, it goes back to that accountability,
Mm-hmm.
recognizing that even
Mm-hmm.
though I may not have been the one to cause this infliction or this hurt or
Mm-hmm.
this pain,
Mm-hmm.
like there is a sense of generational trauma associated with seeing somebody of my skin color,
Mm-hmm.
and interacting with somebody of my skin tone, you know, so taking that accountability and taking that responsibility to say, like, look, yes, people of my skin tone were the ones that inflicted this pain in the past, but I'm here to atone for that in every way possible that I can at this point in my life
Yes.
and try to just not justify, rectify the
Yes.
wrongs that have been done.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And I think I wrote down a quote here while you were talking.
Mm-hmm.
William Wilberforce, he was an 18th century abolitionist to abolish the sex trade and human
Mm-hmm.
trafficking in general. And he says, it is the true duty of every man to promote the happiness of his fellow creatures to the utmost of his power.
Yes.
And I
Mm-hmm.
feel like that is our responsibility as
That
social
is.
workers.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
That is our responsibility. Like you said again, I'm gonna highlight it. I wasn't a social worker in the past tense, but now that I'm a current one, I see what mistakes they have made. So I just want to say sorry. But I'm
Yeah.
here to, as I'm saying, I'm here to step in and change that. I'm not
Mhm.
trying to change the narrative because what has been done already. So me
Yes.
try to cover it up, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. So I do get that. I do get that. Um, what does accountability look like in everyday social work practice?
That's a
Because you
great
you
question.
see you see where I'm leading to because your answer was there and then okay, accountability. So what can we do? I understand it's accountability, but what can we do in our practice? Like what interventions within ourselves can we practice to.
Yeah. So let me think on this for a moment so that I
Mhm.
don't just spit out some random
It's
answer.
okay. It's okay. It's okay.
I
Mm-hmm.
think so. I'm not going to sit here and say that what happened in the past was my fault.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't take accountability in that manner, but I can
Yes.
take accountability to say that I'm not going to sit back and let it happen again on my watch.
Okay.
You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? So,
Mm-hmm.
like, understanding that if I'm not careful and if I turn the other way, then
Mm-hmm.
everything, the history can repeat itself.
Mm-hmm.
So I need to take that
Yes.
proactive stance and like we said, come alongside my client,
Yes.
hold them by
Yep.
the hand and walk through it
Mm-hmm.
with them.
Yes.
Um, in one of the, I think it was Dr. Minnick's class. She was saying
Mm-hmm.
that I'm not going to walk to hell for you, but I will walk
Yeah.
through hell with you.
With you. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I like that. I like that, because I'm gonna be there every step. I'm gonna try my best to be there every step, but just I'm gonna be there every step, but just trying to making that, comparison because it is that, I can't endure what you endured already or currently, but I can walk you through that fire. I see. I get that from that lens. I do. I do. I do. That's a great thing. And also, just like being an advocate too. Like being an advocate when our client don't say nothing at all. They may write down their thoughts and feelings, and you summarize up what they say, and you just writing down and saying to people, doctors, whatever the case might be, hey, this is what my client is feeling and saying because they don't feel comfortable saying it to you. And this is why, because of X, Y, and Z, past traumas, and that's how we can help this, community too.
Yes.
Um, and then just one more, and we're gonna end this. What can social workers respect in no. How can social workers respect Indigenous knowledge while working within Western systems?
So what comes to mind when you ask that question automatically is
Mm-hmm.
honestly the difference between like Eastern medicine versus Western medicine.
Mm-hmm.
So just recognizing that there is no right or wrong answer to
Mm-hmm.
how to heal somebody, and that's
Yes.
the same is true with Indigenous population versus the Western population. There is no right or wrong answer as to how we practice our faith, how we
Mm-hmm.
practice our healing, how we practice politics. Like
Yes. Mm-hmm.
there are differences in the world for a reason, and that's what makes it beautiful. And so
Mm-hmm.
recognizing those differences and accepting those differences is going to help us to
Mm-hmm.
become better social workers
Yes.
by being able to serve various populations in that manner.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I do love that response because it just shows how, where we can start at and also where we can finish it in a way.
Yeah.
It's all about, again, they're not, we're going to treat them like they're equal, you know? Like I said, they endure different stuff. Things happen in both areas. But when you talk about them both, hardships within both. So you can't just downplay one or the other, especially this community when they had a place and are growing as a population.
Yes, I
So
agree.
yes, so thank you. That was my presentation and what I thought it was really important, and the stuff outside of what we learn in his class.
Yes, I agree. Excellent job.
Yeah, thank you, thank you.
You're welcome. All right. So first thing, so part four of Race, Class, and Gender in the United States, an integrated study by Paula Rothenberger with Christina Sue Accomando.
Hmm.
Um, the first section in part four was myths about physical racial differences were used to justify slavery and are still believed by doctors today.
Hmm.
So this section basically talked about Susan Moore, who was a an MD physician, a
Hmm.
doctor's physician, and how she came down with COVID-19 during 2020,
Hmm.
and she ended up being hospitalized, and her doctor, who was a white male,
Mm-hmm.
refused to give her service because she was a Black female. And
Mm-hmm.
she basically said, like, look, I need this medication and I need this pain medication. He refused service to her, and she
Yes.
ended up dying not too long after that. So my question and just my idea about this is, how is her treatment any different than that of the experimentation of African American citizens, such as that in the Tuskegee study of untreated syphilis? I mean, basically, the idea is like, let's lead this person to believe that they will or are receiving care for their ailment, but actually, since they're Black, let's experiment and just see how long this illness can go on and how the ailment fares when it's untreated, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And it screams racial injustice, and honestly just makes me so angry. And as a social worker, um, it screams incompetency on so many levels. So I just wanted to cover that aspect. I'm
Okay.
gonna
Mm-hmm.
kind of cover each one of these sections before I jump into the social work aspect again. So the second section of part four is, how can I be unarmed when my Blackness is the weapon that you fear?
Mm-hmm.
And this touches base on Katherine Johnston, Breonna Taylor, Marissa Alexander, Trayvon Martin, and Tamir Rice. And we're so familiar with so many of these names. And the list honestly could just go on and on and on with basically police brutality. And the idea that's covered in this section is the right to bear arms and how it's racially unequal.
Mm-hmm.
The what is it? The Castle Law. Hold on. The Castle Doctrine,
Mm-hmm.
the stand your ground, and the open carry
Mm-hmm.
laws that are so inequitable in practice, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to use a personal example here. So I grew up in Baltimore
Mm-hmm.
initially, but then we moved to Clear Spring, Maryland, which is like Hickville, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was surrounded on three sides by cornfields, and there was only one person of color in my entire high school. I
Mm.
graduated with 117 people in my class, and
Wow.
of those 117, one of them was Black. That was it. There were no Hispanics, there were no other minority population members. And we went to school in such a rural area that you would pull up in the high school parking lot during hunting season, and there were hunting rifles in the back windows of trucks,
Mm-hmm.
and nothing was ever done about that. The principal
Mm-hmm.
allowed it, and like there was no cause for alarm or concern because these are
Mm-hmm.
stereotypical deer hunting white boys.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
then you have somebody like Tamir Rice, who is a 12-year-old on a playground with his head down on a picnic table, and he's got a play toy gun in his back pocket, and he gets shot and killed. Like it. Again,
Standards.
like I'm gonna sigh a lot during this presentation because it just frustrates me and infuriates me to no end. Um, but so this this section in particularly, beyond just the racial inequality and the racial injustice, it screams to me about how social workers need to educate the community about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the anti-racism in particularly, because a child with a toy gun, regardless of color, should not be shot and killed. And I understand that the orange cap on the toy was off, but like there was no warnings, there was nothing. And unfortunately, in all of those examples with Katherine Johnson, Breonna Taylor, Marissa Alexander, and Trayvon Martin as well, all of those examples, there were no warnings on behalf of the police before the shots were fired. And if there were, they were not clear enough warnings, you know? So in addition to the racial inequity there is just the police brutality that needs to be addressed. And as social workers, it's our responsibility to educate our community on those aspects.
Yes.
Um, the Ghosts of Stonewall Policing Gender and Policing Sex. This article was truly disgusting. The idea of how the LGBTQ plus population, specifically in the power plant
Mm-hmm.
nightclub. So basically the police came in to an LGBTQ plus nightclub and they said, everybody hit the floor, and over 350 people in the club at the time, basically they were handcuffed and they were sat in their own filth and squalor, as well as their peers' filth and squalor, for hours on end, while they sat there and said that they were addressing liquor licenses with the club. And my question and my thoughts here is, how is this, and I use this extension lightly, okay, but how is this any different than how we treat prisoners of war, where
Mm-hmm.
they are detained
Mm-hmm.
and left to squander in their own filth and waste, you know? And
Mm-hmm.
I get it, the prisoners of war have a lot more serial degradation, as well as physical and sometimes sexual assault and just all these additional things. But the idea of being detained and left to squalor in your own filth is gruesome. And for me, my question is, how is this any different than war? There is a war going on between LGBTQ plus population and heterosexual population, specifically homophobic population,
Mm-hmm.
Um, so healing the trauma of post 9/11 racism, one
Mm-hmm.
story and melody at a time. So this article outlines the aspect of a Muslim individual, a Sikh, Sikh. I
Mm-hmm.
believe I'm saying that correctly.
Mm-hmm. I think you
Um,
are.
okay. This was of a Sikh American after 9/11 who was on the subway and his turban was ripped off by somebody on the subway, and he was verbally assaulted regarding his faith and his customs and culture.
Mm-hmm.
And in so many religious aspects, people's hair, their hair jewelry, or their head jewelry, or their head coverings are symbols of not only their faith, but symbols of honor, identity, and enlightenment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So understanding that somebody's turban or hijab or head covering of some sort, ripping that off is like ripping off somebody's identity and ripping off their honor and their faith and their enlightenment source. Like it's a very physical attack on somebody. As a social worker, I feel like being able to understand people's head dressings is a way to understand their identity more and be able to serve them and their culture more appropriately. And again, this goes back to educating the community around us and recognizing that there are so many naive people around us, that it's our job and our responsibility to help, crowdsource and make it a safer place for individuals in our community that do have different head dressings.
Definitely.
Living in an immigrant family in America, how fear and toxic stress are affecting daily life, well-being, and health. So this whole article outlines the idea of ICE and deportation and immigration. Um, Specifically, just living in constant fear of deportation, which is so prevalent in today's world right now with how
Yes.
big ICE is, and how active ICE is, especially under the Trump administration.
Mm-hmm.
the idea for me comes about is how does living in constant fear of deportation or family separation shape immigrant families' ability to fully participate in society
Mm-hmm.
and feel accepted as members of their community.
Yeah.
Um, as a social worker, I feel like it's our duty to protect and include members of minority groups, especially those that are potential victims of ICE and
Mm-hmm.
deportation. It's our duty to help them to feel included in their community, but also safe in their community. And a big part of that is outsourcing and finding appropriate resources to help them to feel safe. So whether that is getting them lawyers, like not getting them lawyers, but resourcing them to lawyers that can help
I
with those
understand what you're saying.
aspects. Yeah,
Mm-hmm. I
yeah.
understand what you're saying. Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so basically, under the Trump administration, ICE has run rampant with sexual abuse of minorities, and especially those that are trying to cross the border from Mexico into the United States. And in particularly on page 709, there's a quote here that says, um, under the Trump administration, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency, or ICE, has gained provisional approval to begin destroying its sexual assault records after 20 years. This is gross to me. This is abhorrent. I feel like in the USA, mandated reporters are required to inform DSS, CYS, etc., of
Mm-hmm.
any kind of child sexual abuse or child abuse, regardless of how much time has passed. There is no statute of limitations. So why are we putting a statute of limitations on this gross negligence? Like what is the difference between an adult who is sexually assaulted
Mm-hmm.
trying to enter the country safely or children that are also sexually assaulted? There were
Mm-hmm.
numerous stories in this chapter of children being sexually assaulted and physically
Mm-hmm.
assaulted as well. Like, why are we putting a statute of limitations
Mm-hmm.
on this when regular American citizens don't have a statute of limitations? you
Mm-hmm.
know
Mm-hmm.
um All right. Why Black women's experiences of the Me Too movement are different.
Mm-hmm.
The idea was basically that females have barely, Black females in particularly, have barely any truth about them, but it's forced upon them
Mm-hmm.
by police and
Mm-hmm.
white females. They basically say that because of where you're from or the way that you move, you don't
Mm-hmm.
have the justice and the ability to um, stay covered up, you
Yes.
know,
Mm-hmm.
and they associate that with their identity and say that because you're a Black female, you are required almost to dress provocatively, and it's almost expected. Um, so women who have come forth in the Me Too movement, they specifically are kind of just pushed to the side and neglected,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is also really interesting considering this article mentions that it was the Me Too movement was brought about by a Black female,
Yes.
you
Mm-hmm.
know? Um,
Mm-hmm.
so what responsibilities do diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives and social justice movements have to recognize and address forms of sexual violence that are
Mm-hmm.
shaped by both racism and sexism? So the next is I'm a trans man, I had an abortion,
Mm-hmm.
reproductive rights, and everyone's fight. Basically, this article covers the idea of a gender neutral trans man. He was raped in college and then found out a couple weeks later that he was pregnant. And this was before he had come to fruition of his trans identity. So it was when they were still technically female. Um, they got an abortion in a place where they felt safe that their identity would not be thrown under the bus, as well as it was like a Planned Parenthood service. Um, this person is now trans man or identifies as a trans man, and they encourage so sincerely that if you had an abortion, come forth with your story because of
Mhm.
the Roe v. Wade overturn.
Mhm.
They say that it is important to share their story as a queer or a trans person, or
Mhm.
as a person who has had an abortion, because it is your right as a human being. It is medical care as a human being, and abortion is a form of medical care.
Mhm.
So, as a social worker, I feel it is our responsibility yet again to stand up for and basically hold the hand of the people that we are serving alongside of, walk
Mhm.
through the fire with them, just
Mhm.
as we discussed earlier, rather than
Mhm.
going to hell for them, um,
Mhm.
walk through hell with them. So, yeah. All right. First Nations, queer, and education. Um, this article talks about a two-spirited individual, um,
Mhm.
as is identified in Indigenous tribal nations,
Mhm.
specifically the idea of accepting oneself as a
Mhm.
two-spirited or gender binary or gender neutral person, basically a queer individual. I
Mhm.
really, really like, um, so there are a few quotes here. Um, Okay, yeah. So they went about and got down on their knees. They prayed the spirit out of homosexuality would leave me. It wasn't until years later when I sat with that Medowan elder that I realized that if what she said was true, then if the spirit of homosexuality left me, then my own spirit would too, for they were inexplicably intertwined. I had prayed that God take the spirit of homosexuality from me, and then I had prayed, fasted, and cried some more. I just wanted to die. And it took me a couple of years before I saw the light and decided to leave. So I want to pause on just my overall uh, coverage of the textbook here, and I want to jump up to. Okay, so legislative debate attributed suicidality among LGBTQ plus adults, the buffering effect of community belongingness. This article by Watts and et al. It covers the idea that basically suicidality amongst LGBTQ plus adults is so severe unless there is a sense of community belongingness. It doesn't specifically mention Indigenous peoples in the article, but it does mention the idea of having a sense of community belongingness, a sense of
Mhm.
purpose, and a sense of identity
Mhm.
as being the buffering effects against suicidality. Um, and I think that that is really crucial with this aspect where he says that I just wanted to die
Mhm.
because he felt so separated and so ostracized
Mhm.
from society because of his identity as a gender neutral or a two-spirited person.
Mhm.
Now, slightly down, he does mention, interestingly, their self-esteem was tied to their spirituality, and if their spirit lived, so did they. He was
Mhm.
then able to identify that being a queer native didn't impact his own self-esteem, and he was able to identify that that was a part of who he was and accept it, and he found a sense of belonging and a sense of community involvement, so he found a sense of purpose again.
Mhm.
Body encounters, barriers, or stairs, not a metaphor. Basically, what I gathered from it is that regardless of ableism, disableism, black, brown, white, trans, non-binary, Muslim, Christian,
Mhm.
etc., regardless of what you identify as, there are boundaries and systemic hurdles that have to
Mhm.
be overcome in any aspect, you know? So, incivility, ostracism, and social climate surveys through the lens of disabled people and a scooping review. This article basically discusses that there's a sense of ostracism for disabled individuals
Mm-hmm.
throughout society because of both the Trump administration and how he is overtaking rights for disabled individuals, but also just
Mm-hmm.
societal expectations. Something as simple as having stairs rather than ramps, something as
Mm-hmm.
simple as not being allowed to have student aides in classrooms
Mm-hmm.
to assist with, specific disabilities.
Mm-hmm.
So incivility and ostracism run rampant in our society because
Mm-hmm.
of disabilities. And that's something
Mm-hmm.
as social workers that we need to address and be able to assist our clientele with.
Mm-hmm.
It is our responsibility to help them to feel a part of society and included in
Yes.
societal standards, regardless of what their ableism or disableism is.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last part here, environmental racism is poisoning America's waters. This article outlines how there are multiple cities in the United States that don't have access to clean water.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like big cities like Chicago and
Mm-hmm.
Baltimore,
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. My thoughts on this article is that this is not a third world country. How is it that predominantly
Mm-hmm.
Black and Brown or minority neighborhoods still have poor access to healthy running water?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer is very simple. It's environmental racism,
Mm-hmm.
and that is a really tough idea for me to wrap my head around. I'm still
Mm-hmm.
just now learning about environmental racism.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but my thoughts are, as a social worker, how can we address environmental racism? And that's the first
Mm-hmm.
question that I want to lead into for you, Dejah, is
Okay.
as social workers, how do we address environmental racism?
Don't be afraid to speak out about these injustices, you know? Um, just because you're not a part of the oppressed group, you feel like, oh, I don't have no area to talk about this. No, talk about it. d- this how you fight against it. The people that's not knowledgeable, oh, I know the only things I know about is slavery and the two other things when it comes with black people. It's more things, you know. So it's all about just extending your knowledge, having those comfortable conversations, talking with black and brown folks about their experiences with things. See how they grew up. What neighborhood was they in? Was they in an impoverished neighborhood or was they in a neighborhood that had money? Because with me, I wasn't I wasn't in an impoverished neighborhood, even though I lived in Philadelphia, but probably a couple blocks over, I'm in poverty. That's how it
Yes.
is. So like it's just like even though I wasn't in it, I still saw it. Even though I wasn't, and nothing happened to me regarding anything like that, racism or anything, I still saw it. It's amongst my people. So, just keeping that.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely. I think you touched on something that you touched on during your part of the presentation is
Mm-hmm.
taking that time
Yes. Mm-hmm.
specifically, like
Yes.
time well spent is time getting to know your neighbors, you know?
Yes. Just like, how when you move into, I tell people this all the time. Just like how, oh, honey, whatever your spouse is, man and woman, oh, let's go house hunting. Let's go apartment shopping. You're gonna meet your next door neighbor is gonna be somebody new to you, right? So
Yes.
treat your everyday interactions just like that. You know, you're gonna have to be uncomfortable if they stop up top of you, if they make a bunch of noise. What do? You still have to deal with it. So when it comes to this depression in these groups, just be more willing. You willing to deal with the small stuff, Let's deal with this big stuff. You know, um, it was a quote that I was talking to this lady. Oh, Miss Danielle
Mhm.
Martin. Somebody had told her, you got some big shoes to fill. She
Yes.
said, she said, no, I don't. I brung my own.
Oh,
Like
I love that.
do you see that, like within that is this, like, people can put you in a box. Oh, just because this person was in this doesn't mean I could fulfill this. So you know what I'm saying? It's just like that. So just leading by example and leadership, being that leadership for others too. That's important because you talk about this, the next person you can interest the next person. Oh, I can talk about this. I can engage in X, Y, and Z conversations.
Yes, yes.
Hmm.
I love that example that you gave, because
Hmm.
Dr. Martin, a lot
Hmm.
of people do expect her to fill Miss Di's shoes, but
Yes.
she's absolutely right. She brought her own
Hmm.
shoes to fill.
Yes. And I'm not, she said, she was just like saying, like, I'm not, she paved the way for me. I wanna
Yes,
thank her, you know, but she paved the way for me so I can be in these type of rooms, so I can be in
yes,
this type of leadership examples. So it's like, I might have a little bit in her, but I'm also myself, you know.
yes.
I get that.
And I think that leads honestly into the idea of us in general as social workers. Like, we're not paving a brand new path.
No, we're not. It's already here. It's just, like I said, all the harm that's already been done, we can't cover it up. We cannot. So if we try to cover it up, it's different. How you gonna try to cover it up but try to learn at the same time? You can't
Yes.
do that. You can't do that at all. It's about combining both,
Mhm.
understanding that harm has been done. Let me see how I can change it in the future now.
Yes, agreed,
Mhm.
100%. Okay, excellent.
Mhm.
So this leads into I'm gonna actually just kind of repeat some of the questions that I mentioned
Mhm.
throughout my
No problem.
presentation.
Mhm.
So I want to jump back into the section two regarding the castle doctrine, the stand your ground, and the open carry. So
Mhm.
my question is, in what ways do the cases discussed illustrate how laws that are race neutral operate inequitably in practice?
It's kind of hard. It's kind of hard. It's kind of hard to do that because, like I said, I'm highlighted in my presentation. These beliefs and values or people are too strong. They are too strong to try to just, okay, see it from my point of view. Say if you wasn't so kind, right? If you wasn't so kind, and I come to you, explain the situation, and your beliefs, I think it was right for them to do that. I think because X, Y, and Z. That's the problem today. It's a lot of opinions. It's I don't know, it's just a lot of just so stuck on the past life. Still bringing what happened in the past and the norms in the past to present day. I can't really answer that question because it's hard. It's hard because for me, I know these barriers of our beliefs and our values hold us back from, thinking about this. If I have a client, that's white, and Nazi, he want to do all that, all the case might be, and I try to talk to him about this, it's not gonna work. Like you know what I'm saying? He's not
Yes,
gonna get my point of view because his beliefs and values are already set. It's
yes,
already set. So it's kind of hard to change somebody's values unless it happened to them. For example, let's talk about the ICE situation, right?
yes,
Black and brown people been enduring this for years, but now that white white people are getting shot, now y'all really see how it can be. So,
yes,
like I said again, until it's them, they will understand. Until it's not them, they're never going to see it from that point of view. So, like, it's hard to really answer this question. Like, from somebody that don't really, they can set aside their beliefs and their values. We can, work one on one. They're gonna see from what I'm talking about. Okay, I'm really educated. I can see it from your social worker lens, but other than that, I don't think so. It's really hard.
yes. I
Yes.
do agree. It's such a
Mm-hmm.
grand question. And unfortunately,
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of like, how do you solve world poverty and world hunger?
Yeah.
It's one of those things that's like,
Mm-hmm.
there's so many facets to it that it's
Yes,
nearly
yes.
impossible to, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, you mentioned something that brought up the idea. So I accidentally bought the 11th edition of the book,
Uh-huh.
and I started reading it before I realized it was the wrong edition.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the sections in here talked about C.C. McDonald, who was
Mm-hmm.
a Black trans individual.
Yeah.
And you mentioned, the idea of talking to a white Nazi.
Mm-hmm.
She was attacked by a white Nazi and
Yeah.
she stabbed that person in self-defense. And then she ended up going to jail for second-degree manslaughter.
Yes.
Um, and
Sorry about
the
that.
the thought was like, my thought was, you are not going to get through to white Nazis.
Yeah.
And there are
Mm-hmm.
just some people that are so ignorant and bullheaded that you're just not going to get through to.
Mm-hmm.
And that leads me into my last question, just based on time.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a quote here again by William Wilberforce, the 18th century abolitionist. He
Mm-hmm.
says, "You may choose to look the other way, but you can never again say that you did not know."
Mm-hmm.
So, as a social worker, how can we apply that quote into our daily practice?
Like, I want to highlight this again. Wherever we uncomfortable, we cannot run. Like, we cannot run because again, it's still happening. You still gonna come in contact with something like this again. It may not be the same, like the same experience, but it make you feel the same, inside. So just, just standing in that spot as a social worker, being a leader for yourself. Because not a lot of people talk about that. We talk about being a leader for others, but what about ourselves, especially in our professions? So I think that's important too to highlight. In that quote also, you can complete X, Y, and Z, but just know when you run, X, Y, and Z is going to happen. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? So
Yeah,
just being aware, checking our biases because our biases make us connect with that quote. It
yeah,
makes us do that. So it's just like, being in our biases, learn from our own biases, you know.
absolutely. Yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
think you're spot on with that. Excellent.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much
Mhm.
for the discussion, Deja. I
No
really
problem.
appreciated your insights.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope that you learned something from my part of this presentation as well.
Thank you. And thank you very much. It was
Of
nice.
course.